Now let's talk about logging. The server works in a way that, for example, you can close this interface and it's still going to work. And since it's working and you don't see it, you need to kind of know what it's doing. So for that, I created logging, and it has different levels of logging. Now, the server itself records the log into just a regular plain text file. And the file it logs to is located here. Now, I'll show you how it looks. You see, this is the directory where the server is configured by default. It's cfksmtp, right? It creates this directory because in Windows 7 and Windows Vista, because of the virtualization of folders, you cannot create directories accessible by two different programs in program files or like documents and settings. It doesn't allow it. It starts to virtualize it. And I don't want this to happen. So it creates it right in C, and you can change it if you like. You can change some different directories where your queue is, where your user's queue is, and so on. You can change it. But the main configuration is here. The main configuration is very small. It's just this file, common, right? It contains the configuration for the server. You can see it here. Right? This is the configuration file. And this is all that this GUI does. That's why I'm saying you can easily close it and nothing gets harmed. The server is still working. Now, the configuration also contains the DNS list, the fields, info, and so on, some smaller files that are required by the server. Now, this is the log file. This is the main log file. This is just a text file, as you can see. I'll show you. Here it is. This is just a log file, nothing fancy. And now, what happens with the log file is when the log file grows bigger than 1 megabyte, it has a limit of 1 megabyte. In order for it to not grow indefinitely, it's just going to create another log file, a new file, rename this file with a timestamp, and you can see it here. You see, this is just 1 and 2 and 3 and so on. All those log files. You can delete them if you don't need them, but just in case you need them for some reason, they are going to be archived here. You can obviously visit them later and see what's happening in there. Now, the amount of this file, the number of these files, will directly depend on your setting here. Right? This is the log level. What happens with the log, it can log absolutely everything. For example, if you set it here, it logs everything, including the message tags, including everything. And it even warns you that the log will be very big. Now, if you change it to this way, right, this is the default when it comes out of the box. This is the default. It only logs fatal errors, warnings, info, and debug. This is just information about warnings and debugs and without the message text itself. Now, if you want your log file to be even smaller, then you can switch it to this, and it only logs the fatal errors, if it happens, errors, warnings, and info, but no debug information. The debug information itself is the protocol, right? I can show you in previous log file, for example. This is the protocol, the data, okay, and everything that server sends and receives is the protocol data. It's not going to log that. This is the debug. You see this in the log file, you can see the timestamp when this event happened. This is the thread ID of the thread that happened, that did that, and at the log level. This is debug information, right? This is info information, right? And this is also debug. So as you can see, debug is prevalent here. There's lots of debug information. So if you switch it off, immediately your log file will be much smaller. Now, the next item here is you can log only fatal errors, and warnings without info. In this case, your log will mostly be empty. Only in case of an error, you'll have some record here. That's what happens is you can do it, you can switch it over to this setting after everything is set up, after everything is complete, and you are sure that your configuration is just fine, looks working, and you can switch it to this setting, like fatal errors, and warnings. Now this one is one higher. It only records fatal errors and errors, no warnings. And this one is even one higher. This only records fatal errors. I wouldn't recommend it, but if you want to, you can set it this way. Usually you can set it this way after everything's configured, and you'll have pretty small log file. It's not going to be very significant. You can review it periodically from time to time in a text file, or you can also review it with a log file viewer. Let me show you. So this is how it looks when you press this button, and it's going to be automatically updating as the log file progresses. It's going to be jumping higher and higher. Those lines will be moving. Now, inside the log file, right, as you can see, all the log events are here. I'll just make it bigger. And they are color-coded. So all the debug information and regular info is black. And if the error happens, if there is an error, in this case there's no errors, it's going to be red. Right? In this, you can see it as red. Now, this is your message, right? And this message is multi-line. It has multiple lines inside the log file. But in order to see those multiple lines, I created a viewer. You can click here on this button, and it displays the whole message as multi-line. And you can see the message itself. This is how your server receives the message in MIME encoding. This is going to be a MIME encoded message. Now, you can close the log from here, or you can clear the log from here. Same, you can clear the log from here. What happens is, if I press this button, it sends a command to the file, to the server to clear the log, and it becomes empty. You see, I'll show you. It's empty. Now, this is great when you are debugging some problem, and especially if you want my help. It's great if you would do this: clear the log file first, right? Or even stop the server, clear the log file, start the server again. Once you start the server, send the message that creates a problem. Let's say you have a problem with some particular message. For some reason it doesn't send, or it gives you an error or something like that. Just clear the log file, then I'll have just this one message in the log file, and it's going to be much easier for me to find. Otherwise, I'll have to look through this kind of log file, right? And it's going to be very messy and a lot of stuff in there I might not be able to find and help you. So it's preferable way. Now, this concludes the log file.